Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I felt like doing a little bit of a fall card, so I created this fall pumpkin scene, and I wanted to play around with the mica spray stains. I picked out any of the greens, yellows, and oranges in basically all of the Halloween sets. I just wanted a nice variety to choose from. At one point I thought maybe I'd use some of the natural or neutral colors on the background, but I ended up deciding not to do that. I thought it'd be a little bit too much shimmer. I'm using this Pumpkin Colorize duo set, and what I like to do before I cut anything out is I like to organize everything. So the two pumpkin or the pieces for each pumpkin are all together. I'm cutting them out of mixed media Heavystock. I'm going to cut them out and assemble them first, and then I'm going to spray them with mica stains. You could use the mixed media Heavystock and spray with the micas first, but I thought it would use up less of the mica stain, as well as the fact that I could control exactly where the colors went. And I knew that I wanted to have kind of 3 shades of pumpkin, one a little bit darker, one medium tone, and one lighter. So by doing it all out of the Heavystock at once and assembling it once, I could control that a little bit better. So I'm going to take all of the pieces for one of the pumpkin dies, and I actually ended up forgetting to do the stem piece on it, so I do go back with the second set and do it. I cut them all at once, and what I like to do when I'm doing dies like this is cut them all at once and then kind of pile them up, especially if I'm doing multiples of the same die set. That way I know that all of the pieces that go together for that particular die cut are together. I love these colorized dies because they give so much extra dimension to these die cuts, and to me they look a lot more interesting than just kind of flat die cuts. So now I've done the first one. The other ones I'm just setting this one on screen, but I'm going to die cut them off screen because it's exactly the same process. I'm just going back and forth and then putting everything in a pile. So I've got all of my pieces die cut now, and when I like to assemble these, I like to line them up before I start to glue anything together. That way I know that I'm going to be doing everything in the right order, and I know that I have all of the pieces that I need before I even start. I've done it before where I've tried to start assembling before I even had everything out of the die, and I ended up doing it in the wrong order. So by doing it this way, I know I'm going to have everything in the right order, and I know that I have all my pieces ready to go. Just using Distress Collage medium. If you've seen any of my videos, you know it's my favorite way to glue things together. I love liquid adhesive because it gives you a little bit of wiggle room, and the Distress Collage medium dries completely matte and it dries completely clear. So if anything happens to seep out, you're not even going to see it. So I'm just layering these pieces on top of each other. And if you've never used a colorized die before, the cool part about them is when you die cut, they get little indentation marks where the next piece goes on top of it. So there's kind of very little guesswork that goes into putting these together, because you can see those indentation marks and they match the next die, so you know which one goes where. Sometimes I will reference the cover of the die simply because for this one here I wasn't sure whether which way was up and which way was down. I could have put it on my die cut and matched it, but I just thought it would be easier to look at the finished one. So I always have that packaging close by just to double check. Much easier to double check before gluing something down in the wrong spot. And like anytime I glue, I've got an acrylic block here that holds everything down, keeps it nice and flat while everything is drying, and it keeps my hands free to work on other things. So that first pumpkin is done. I'm working on the second one, and I do exactly the same method. I line everything up so that I know exactly which order I'm gluing everything. I'm doing the same Distress Collage medium, and I love the fact that I can just kind of shimmy it in place. Sometimes when you first put it on, it's not in exactly the right spot, so it's nice to be able to just ease it into place, whereas a double-sided tape, you'd have to get it perfect the first try. So it's definitely my preference, especially when gluing paper together, paper to paper. It's nice to have a little bit of wiggle room. I'll often lift it up just to shimmy it in place as well to make sure that I line everything up correctly. I find that I'm just a little bit able to see it better that way. I don't often do a lot of fall cards. I'm not really a Halloween person. I love fall and pumpkins and leaves and stuff like that, but the the spooky part of Halloween is just not my cup of tea. So I tend to kind of ignore it, but I thought these pumpkins were absolutely adorable. I've had them for a while. I've made one card with them and I really wanted to pull them out again. While I was assembling those pumpkins, I thought, you know what, they would look really cute with leaves. And that first die set that I had there, that was the one that I thought was going to be perfect, but those leaves ended up being too big. So I went through any of my floral dies that had greenery, and this brushstroke flowers die set was perfect. So I'm just die cutting some of those leaves out of the excess mixed media Heavystock. I cut, I think 7 of them out, maybe 6. And I'm going to spray them at the same time as I spray the pumpkins. So I've got all the mica sprays there. I've kind of lined them up in the order that I want to spray them. I had them on the side. One thing about mica sprays, if you've never used them before, they have a colored mica in them that settles to the bottom. So you want to make sure that you thoroughly mix it up before you spray anything. This particular bottle here that I'm shaking up, it actually doesn't spray, and I've sprayed it a few weeks ago, so I know it's clogged and I know it does work. Typically, when this happens, you can take that top off and run it through warm water while spritzing it, and it will completely unclog itself. This particular time, this is the first time it's ever happened that it's not worked, so I have to get a new sprayer for that, but it's nice to know that they are available. Any of these pieces, I'm just spraying them and I'm going to set them aside to dry. Once the color has absorbed into the paper, I'll put them off to the side, and then I'm going to use up that excess mica stain that is on my mat. There's no point in it going to waste. So once I'm just waiting until the excess of the spray kind of absorbs into the paper, and I know when I lift it up, it's not going to start to run and ooze. Some of those pieces with the green, I got a little bit too much spray on them. So what I do afterwards is I just get a corner of a paper towel and I just tap it lightly just to get some of that excess off. You could leave it on there to dry, but because there's so much there, it's likely not going to dry very quickly, as well as the fact that it's going to be quite dark. So these pieces have absorbed. They're still slightly damp, but I can touch them without removing any ink. And I'm just going to set them aside to dry. And I'm just taking another piece of mixed media Heavystock and dipping it into that mica stain. It's not going to be super pretty when you're doing it. It looks like a hot mess, but I promise you when it's dried, it looks really, really pretty. And I think it's going to make some really nice leaf die cuts for a future project. Once I've got as much of that mica stain up as possible, I'm using a distress sprayer, and that's going to rehydrate some of the ink that's in there, and it's going to help it to seep to some of the open areas of that cardstock. And then I set that completely aside to dry. I've got another piece of mixed media Heavystock. I'm using a lot of it for this project, and I'm just going to ink blend a quick background. So I have Villanous Potion, Hickory Smoke, and peeled paint here, and I'm just doing a quick ink blended background. You could use whatever colors you wanted. I just liked these for a fall kind of ominous background. You could also use distress sprays. That would work as well, or even the mica stains. I chose not to do them because I thought too much shimmer might be too much, and I thought it would be a nice contrast to have the shimmer on the pumpkins but not on the background. So I'm just using a nice simple circular motion. After I do this, I'm taking a stencil and I'm just going to mist it with water just to get a little bit of a plaid texture in that background. I want it to have just a touch of texture. I'm not doing anything obvious or whatever. I don't want the focus to be taken away from those pumpkins, but I just thought it might be kind of a neat addition to that background there. And all I do with that stencil is I take my distress sprayer and I just mist it lightly, and then I lift it up, move it to a different area, and do that same thing again. You could leave that stencil down if you wanted and let it sit like that. I wanted to lift it up and then just use a paper towel to lift up some of that excess ink. Before I glue my pumpkins onto that background, I'm going to put it onto a card base. So I'm going to cut it down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, just so that it has a little bit of an outline there so that I can put a complementary background for the card base and have it as a natural mat. Before I put it onto that card base though, I'm taking some vellum and I'm putting some sticky permanent sheet adhesive on there, and I'm going to die cut a spider web and a spider. I thought with the Halloween kind of or fall theme, we've had a whole lot of spiders come out recently, so I thought it'd be kind of a cute addition to it. Any of that excess adhesive, I'm just putting that backing right back on it and then tucking it to the side. I am going to use some of it in a little bit to cut out a black spider because I didn't think the vellum would be perfect for a spider. It's perfect for the web though, because I wanted something that was still a little bit sheer. I didn't want completely white or silver cardstock. I thought something that had a little bit of transparency to it would be nice. You don't see a lot of the transparency on the card, but I just thought it would be more suitable for the web itself. And by having that adhesive right on the back of it, it's going to make it so I can just peel that backing off and stick it right to the card. It's going to turn it into a little bit of sticker. That way I don't have to fiddle around with adhesive. Vellum itself hates liquid, so putting a liquid adhesive on the back is a little bit iffy. It can handle a few dots here and there, but I wanted to make sure that it was stuck down nice and well. So this adhesive is perfect for that. I'm going to take all of those little bits out of the die, and then I'm not using this die exactly as it is. I'm going to use parts of it just on the top corners of this card background. But I'm going to take this spider. It's done with some black mixed media Heavystock, so it's a really nice dark, but it's got a bit of a suede finish to it. So I love it for black cardstock. It's just wonderful to work with. I'm cutting that back off that spider. That's the little web part that's hanging down, and I'm going to glue it to on top of the vellum piece so that it looks like the vellum part is coming right out from the spider. Taking all of those excess little bits out, I want as many of them out as possible so they're not in my way, and I tuck that aside so that I can use it in just a moment. I'm taking this background and putting it onto my card base, and I just chose a card base because it complemented the pumpkins nicely and kind of framed it. I'm going to glue those pumpkins down, and because there's a lot of dimension to them, I am going to put my acrylic block with a glass jar with some beaded or glass beads or whatever in it so that it has a little bit of weight to hold it down while it dries. I want to make sure that everything is held down well so that it does glue nice and well. For this spider web, I'm only using about 1/4 of it on each corner. So I'm just going to go along the lines of the web and cut that out and then put it on there. You could do it a different way if you wanted, but I just thought it was the perfect shape. And because this web isn't completely symmetrical, when I use another piece on the other corner, it's going to be completely different. So it's not going to look like it's two exactly the same webs on it, which I really like with this particular one. It looks a little bit quirky and a little bit more interesting to look at. So I'm going to do the same step on this corner of this web, but it wasn't actually at a 90-degree angle, so you'll see me trimming a little bit more off of it so that it actually fits in that corner a little bit better. The nice thing about these Sizzix adhesive sheets is they are permanent, but when you first use them, you can peel them up a little bit so you can position things perfectly. If something doesn't go down right the first time, you have a little bit of leeway, and then I put my acrylic block on there just to hold it in place and make sure that I get some good contact with it. After it's completely dried, I'm taking those leaves and I'm going to use my fingers to curve them a little bit just to give them a little bit of dimension and glue them at the base of the leaf with the Distress Collage medium. I want to give them a little bit of life, and by leaving them flat, the end result is a little bit flat. So by curving them, they just look a little bit more natural. This is something that I'll often do with floral die cuts, and I really love the way it looks, so it's perfect for this. And by just putting the glue on the end of the leaf, this piece can easily go in the mail. Those pieces will flatten down, but they do pop up a little bit once the pressure isn't on them. So it's just a nice way to hold them in one place, but they still have some movement to them. I absolutely love how this turned out. There's so much texture and dimension in this piece. Those mica sprays are fantastic to work with. If you haven't already done that, I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a fabulous day.